Hello friend, welcome to our channel. This video describes an incident that will shock you and is considered a memorable incident in the world. Let's move on to the video. On the 24th of November 1971, a Northwest Orient Airlines flight took off from Portland, United States. The short 30-minute flight to nearby Seattle carried only 36 passengers and 6 crew members. None of them knew that among them sat a man who would become the center of one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history, a man later known as D.B. Cooper. The passenger appeared to be a typical businessman, a dark business suit, white shirt, and black trousers. He looked to be in his mid-40s and deliberately chose a seat in the last row of the aircraft, seat 18E. Shortly after takeoff, he introduced himself to flight attendant Florence Schaffner as Dan Cooper, handing her a note with a polite smile. Schaffner, assuming he was attempting to flirt, placed the note in her pocket without reading it. Cooper leaned toward her and calmly told her that she should read the message. The note stated clearly and neatly, "Miss, I have an explosive device in my briefcase, and I want you to sit beside me." Still unsure whether he was serious, Schaffner sat next to him. Cooper opened his briefcase just enough for her to see several red cylinders, connected wires, and a large battery, more than enough to convince her the threat was real. He then calmly stated his demands: $200,000 in cash by 5 p.m., provided in a bag, along with 4 parachuters, 2 main and 2 reserve. Once the plane landed, he required a fuel truck to be ready for immediate refueling, and he warned her not to attempt anything unusual that might put the aircraft in danger. Schaffner quietly walked to the cockpit and informed the pilots, who in turn contacted air traffic control. Another flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, was brought in to communicate directly with Cooper while Schaffner coordinated with the pilots. Soon, the news reached airline president Donald Nyrop, who made a crucial decision: the company would comply fully with the hijackers' demands. His main concern was preventing global news coverage of the hijack, which could damage the airline's reputation. Arranging the money took time, so the pilots were instructed to circle around Seattle rather than land immediately. What was supposed to be a 30-minute flight stretched into 3 hours. Passengers, unaware of the situation, were told the delay was due to minor technical problems. At 5:46 p.m., the plane finally landed in Seattle and parked away from the terminal. Airline staff delivered the bag of cash and parachutes. After verifying the items, Cooper allowed all passengers and most crew members to leave, everyone except flight attendant Tina Mucklow. Once the aircraft was refueled, it took off again with only the pilots, Tina, and Cooper on board. Cooper gave precise instructions. The plane was to fly toward Mexico City at a low altitude of 10,000 feet, with a wing angle of 15 degrees, and at the slowest safe speed. The pilots warned that reaching Mexico would be impossible with the remaining fuel, but Cooper insisted they follow his instructions regardless. What happened next seemed like something out of a film. Cooper told Tina to lock herself inside the cockpit with the pilots. He was left alone in the cabin. Moments later, a warning light appeared, indicating that the rear staircase of the Boeing 727 had been lowered. This aircraft model uniquely allowed passengers to exit from the back while in flight. Cooper had taken the cash, fastened the parachutes, and jumped into the stormy night. At 8:13 p.m., the pilots noticed the aircraft suddenly shift upward at the tail, likely caused by Cooper's jump. They landed in Reno, Nevada, where law enforcement searched the plane. Cooper was nowhere to be found. Only a tie with a tie clip, some torn parachute fabric, and a few personal items like his cigarette butts were left behind. The FBI launched a massive investigation, recovering 66 unidentified fingerprints. The briefcase containing the explosive device, the parachutes Cooper used, and the money were all missing. Despite years of effort, no trace of Cooper himself was found. This became the only unsolved hijacking in U.S. history, and the case officially remained open for 45 years until its closure in 2016, though countless questions remain unanswered. 2 unusual aspects stood out. First, not a single passenger realized they had been on a hijacked plane, and no one was harmed. Many credit this calm outcome to flight attendant Tina Mucklow, who handled the situation professionally and kept Cooper composed. Even the co-pilot later praised her as the perfect person to have been seated beside someone engaged in a serious criminal act. The second curious detail was the name D.B. Cooper. The hijacker had introduced himself as Dan Cooper, but due to a rushed news report in which a journalist misheard Dan as D.B., the incorrect name spread rapidly. This mistake stuck, a psychological phenomenon known as anchoring. People tend to believe the first version of information they hear. As the investigation progressed, questions arose regarding whether Cooper had survived the jump. Experts initially assumed survival was impossible due to the weather, darkness, and harsh terrain. He had leapt into freezing conditions wearing only a business suit, possibly falling into deep forest or icy water. But later events made agents reconsider. Within a year of Cooper's hijack, at least 5 copycat hijackers used his same method, parachuting from moving aircraft to several under far worse conditions, and all survived. This suggested Cooper may indeed have lived. The FBI began searching the likely landing area near Washington State's Lake Merwin. They conducted experiments, pushing weighted sleds from Boeing 727 staircases to calculate the landing zone. They conducted ground searches, knocked door to door at local farmhouses, used search boats on nearby lakes, and even employed a submarine to scan underwater terrain. Yet they found nothing: an otter body, parachute, or even a single $20 bill. A break finally came in 1980, when an 8-year-old boy discovered 3 bundles of decaying $20 bills along the Columbia River. The serial numbers matched the marked ransom money. This supported a new theory proposed by pilot Tom Bowen, who had flown above Cooper's plane the night of the hijacking and later informed the FBI that their estimated drop zone was significantly incorrect. The money was found downstream from the area he had identified, suggesting Cooper may have landed near the Washoe Oogle River. Although only $5,800 of the ransom was ever recovered, its discovery was the only physical trace of Cooper after his jump. The boy who found the bills later sold several of them as collector's items for tens of thousands of dollars. Investigators attempted to identify Cooper through forensic tests, including examining the titanium particles stuck to his tie. These indicated he may have worked in a chemical lab, metal fabrication plant, or even aircraft manufacturing, or perhaps Boeing itself. Sketches of Cooper's face were redrawn multiple times, with the final version being considered the most accurate. Over the years, the FBI named more than 800 possible suspects. Among the most notable was Richard McCoy, who hijacked a Boeing 727 in an almost identical fashion just months after Cooper. Though some believed he might have been Cooper, the FBI eventually ruled him out due to solid evidence placing him elsewhere during the 1971 hijack. Thanks for watching. Hope you like this video.